that you have a different kind of rapport with them. And so Neil, which is funny, we're talking about my wife more than I thought, but she calls Neil Bill 5 years ago.
Welcome to the Electrochemistry Podcast, where we discuss all things electrochemistry. I'm your host, Dr. Alex Peroff, and with me is my co-host, Dr. Neil Spinner. On today's podcast, we have a very special guest, Dr. William Mustain, who is the Associate Dean for Research and Professor of Chemical Engineering at the University of South Carolina. Bill, as he likes to be called, received his PhD at the Illinois Institute of Technology and did a postdoc at Georgia Tech. He's a Fulbright Scholar, has won the CQIA Platinum Innovation Prize. He has a DOE Early Career Award and an Illinois Institute of Technology Young Alumni Award. Now, more important than all of those accolades, Bill is Neil's advisor from graduate school. So if you ever wondered why Neil is the way he is, we can thank Bill for that. So Bill, with that said, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here. I think this is going to be fun.
Yeah.
We can tell a few stories about why Neil is the way he is. But we won't tell too many stories where it's just a bunch of inside jokes and the people listening get a little irritated with
Although
us.
we could, and then it'll be the least popular podcast episode in history, which would be also kind of funny.
Yeah. People just decide to watch this because I heard this was the least popular podcast episode ever.
That's some reverse psychology right
it'd
there.
be a very hipster way to enjoy the podcast.
For sure. For sure, yeah.
Well, we always like to start the podcast off by asking people, why did you choose electrochemistry? Of all the subjects, electrochemistry.
Oh, it's at least for me, it's interesting. If I tell the truth of the story, I had really gotten to the end of my undergrad. I was, April, and I had not started looking for a job. I hate to say this. I was one of those smart kids who didn't really know what to do. And my family, I was a first-generation college student, so they were no help to me. They didn't say, oh, you need to get your resume out there. They didn't give me any guidance. And so I was just kind of floating out there. And I had taken classes with a bunch of the professors at IIT. And Jay Prakash, who ended up being my advisor, and another person had offered me a position in graduate school. And I thought, sure, I guess I don't have anything else that I have sort of in the queue right now. So what am I going to do? So I thought of both of those professors and what they did, and one was environmental statistical modeling, and the other one was hands-on making stuff in the lab around fuel cells and alternative energy. And so that one obviously was way more interesting to me. So I went to Jay and I said, last year you had made me this offer and I'm interested. If you'll still have me. And, we went back and forth and I said, I'll do a master's and I'll just kind of figure it out. And I got into my project and into doing electrochemical engineering and I was addicted to it. And I've been addicted to it for 20 years. And it's been a crazy fun ride. But I mean, that's how I ended up there. I didn't wake up in a sweat in the middle of the night thinking that, oh man, I have to do cyclic voltammetry. It just became part of this thing that I love that I've been doing for a really long time.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. Usually when we have people on the podcast, they kind of fall into electrochemistry by accident. It's like, oh, I got really interested in this one subject and it just so happened to require electrochemistry. And they didn't really care about electrochemistry in the beginning. And then all of a sudden, they start to really enjoy electrochemistry and not even the subject.
I've often had this passing, it's not even passing, more like an active thought that almost nobody ever picks electrochemistry on purpose. And in many cases, almost nobody picks graduate school on purpose, which just kind of begs a lot of fundamental and existential questions about why are we all doing this to ourselves, right?
Well, it's funny. You think about somebody who recruits graduate students and you have to talk to people about why would you go to grad school as opposed to just going out and getting a full-time job. And every once in a while, you find the right thing for a person where sometimes it's the opportunity to make knowledge, right? Not just apply it. For some people, this environment of, being in academia, taking classes is very addictive to them. But yeah, it's really interesting that oftentimes when I talk to people who end up in grad school, yeah, they absolutely didn't think that was the way to go. It is funny, like at home, my daughter's 15. She's super into science. She wants to be a paleontologist, and she already knows she's going to go to grad school. She's 15. You know? So it is funny. So some people fall into it. Some people chose their career. My daughter, I guess, hopefully she gets there when she was 4 years old.
Wow.
And she's been super into it. And
Yeah, but look at her dad. You know? Like, there's some familial influence here for sure.
Yeah.
At the risk of turning this podcast into just me and Bill talking, because we've known each other for a while, and Alex just fades into the background.
Oh, no, that's all good.
You know, I guess the thing that I would say in this regard is it's probably not surprising that you and I ended up in your group at the University of Connecticut, because you're describing your situation, you know, ending up with Jay at IIT and everything, and that's like precisely how I started my career. Like, I remember specifically finishing undergraduate, same thing, like not applying, floating, didn't know what on earth I was going to do. I had no direction. I felt, it's probably the only time in my life, honestly, where I felt directionless. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I applied to like 4 graduate programs and barely got into one, you know, and I was going to just do a master's program as a delay tactic. And I remember you were the person for UConn at that time, for the chemical engineering department, I think, who was, you know, you were responsible for communicating with incoming students about
I was the chair of the grad committee.
Yeah, whatever the position there, yeah. So, and this was before I was even in your group, and you basically convinced me to pursue a PhD instead of a master's, because it was like, well, you'll have a stipend and you'll be able, you know, rather than a master's program, which, you know, is less comprehensive and whatever. So, I mean, even before then, you convinced me to do the PhD program, which I did. And then I ended up in your group, and I hate stroking your ego. It really pains me. But I ended up in your group because I thought you were cool. And I still kind of think you're cool. But that was it. I was like, this guy seems like someone who'd be fun to work for. And he just happened to be doing electrochemistry, and the rest is history, you know.
Yeah, it's funny. Only in a group of nerds have I ever been considered cool at all. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So you bring up something very interesting, which I think it's a nice theme. We actually haven't had a topic where people who are coming out of undergrad, the kind of confusion, because I imagine there has to be a lot of people. Every single year there's a whole new group of undergrads who are graduating but don't know what to do. And like, they're thinking about working, they're thinking about graduate school, and you talk to these people. So like, what are the kinds of discussions? Like, how do you help guide them along the path for like, okay, yeah, you do want to go to graduate school, or no, maybe you're better off working, you know, a job or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of that is rooted in their personality. Mm-hmm. I think if you're going to choose to go to graduate school and you're going to be really successful, very detail-oriented people who are curious are going to thrive in grad school. Mm-hmm. And so part of the interaction with, you know, undergrads in the classroom, it's not just me lecturing to them. One of my favorite parts of teaching is what happens after class. You have office hours and things. Mm-hmm. And somehow, you know, my office hours are pretty well attended, quite frankly. I'll have half the class, and I think part of it is the homework is so hard that that you really have to come to office hours and get me to talk about it with you in order to really get it.
That's really because you're cool. That's what
Yeah,
you said.
yeah,
You're
that's what
nerdy
it is.
cool.
Yeah,
People want to
that's what it
see
is.
and hang out with you. That's what it is. Yeah.
But you get to know the undergrads personally in that environment, where you never get to know them very well personally in the classroom, where you have 50 minutes to just lecture at them.
Right.
And I think you learn this about people. Is somebody, you know, is this particular kid really, like I said, detail oriented, or are they just here to get a good grade, or are they just here to hopefully get through it? And if you have somebody, I don't care what their GPA is, but if I find that someone is there for just getting a good grade, to me, that person is less interesting and less likely to be successful somewhere like grad school, because grad school is such an open-ended problem. There's no right answer. You're just working on a project and you're trying to learn. And somebody who's just there for that little thing at the end that's a grade is really going to struggle, I think, oftentimes.
Yeah.
I'll take a student with a 3.5 GPA and is curious and detail-oriented over a 4.0 student who just is interested in the outcome any day.
Yeah. So I guess so. I come from like just the chemistry background, and most of and you're teaching more like just chemical engineering courses.
Yep.
So one of the issues that I always ran into was like when I was TAing was like, oh, there's always going to be some pre-med students who need to take organic chemistry, they need to take gen chem, and they are really after getting that good grade. But I'm assuming you don't have too many of those people who go, in a chemical engineering track or are taking your classes in particular.
Yeah, that's every time but once what you just said was very true.
Okay.
and the one time was that I taught honors thermo, not the regular thermodynamics class. And honors thermo is not just chemical engineers. It's mechanical engineers, chemical engineers, and you get, somebody here and there from another engineering discipline. And I teach thermo with a real chemical engineering twist to it because I am a chemical engineer. So, week 4, week 5, we're talking about reactions and reactors and stuff. We're not just talking about cycles and, sort of the normal stuff.
Yeah.
So we get into actual chemical reactors and adiabatic reactors and how the composition changes. And suddenly 7 people were gone from a 20-person class. And I had our undergrad director came to talk to me and said, 7 people dropped your class this week. Why did that happen? And I said, I don't know. Why did that happen? So then he goes and talked around with some of the students that hadn't left. And they said that the mechanical engineers are freaked out by the reactions, and they're the honors kids. And so they can't not get an A in that class.
I see. Okay.
And so they were gone. So I thought that was really interesting. It's something I never thought I would ever bump into. But when you get certain types of students, whether they're the honor students or you talked about people who are pre-med, where your GPA is like really, 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 really important. In our discipline, a student gets a B in thermo, it is not the end of the world. They are absolutely going to be fine. And if it is the end of the world, look, you're talking to somebody who did not get a 4.0 every step of every single way. I mean, in grad school, it's actually very funny. So my grad transcripts say I got a 4.0, but that's really not true. So when I was in the master's program, I got a B in grad thermo. But then when I transferred to the PhD program, that B doesn't come because technically I transferred into the PhD program. So my wife, if she listens to this, which she probably won't, she listens to me talk enough, she'll find out, yes, I love you, but I really didn't get a 4.0 in grad school. But my last couple years as an undergrad, I did. I got A's in every class for the last 2 years, but at the beginning, I was way interested in other things in college. So, I mean, I got a couple B's, I got 2 C's, including in physics too, which is where you learn about circuits and that kind of stuff for the first time. So, anyway. For those of you who are also kind of lost in the middle of your undergrad, it's all going to be fine. There's no plan. There doesn't have to be. And this is something else for students that I think is really confusing, that you believe that everybody who is successful has a plan. They're following some timeline that they set in motion in high school or as an undergrad. And I'll tell you, at least my story is that I make decisions as the information comes to me. Maybe that's a very scientific way to think about it, but there's never, ever been a plan. And it's one of the reasons why I've ended up where I am. It's also the reason that our group works on certain things that it didn't work on before. There are areas that emerge in our group and areas that drop away. And it's because I also don't think ahead, I have to be this kind of person. I just pick interesting problems that I want to work on, and I learn as much about those things as I can, and then we charge full steam ahead.
Yeah, I just want to note too, backing up about the controversy of your grade point average. My first thing to say is my condolences on the divorce papers when you arrive back home, because I know your wife, and she told me, and this is totally not made up at all, that if she ever found out that you weren't a perfect 4.0 student, it's just over. So I'm really sorry, but we can move forward. But, I think I can't remember where the quote came from, and I'm sort of going to paraphrase it, but it's like life is, whatever, 80% what happens to you or no, sorry, 20% what happens to you and 80% how you respond to it or something like that. I relate to that as well. And I also appreciate the trying to treat regular decisions like a scientist, take the information and be willing to change your mind if you receive, competing information based on your presuppositions. All those kinds of things are really important. And I mean, I experience that in your group all the time, like, for example, my project was 2.5 years of the worst thing ever, and then 2 years of what I thought was the best thing, which was basically batteries and pivoting.
All right, so this is funny.
Yeah.
To tell one story about Neil.
Oh, boy.
Yes.
I don't know what this is, and I'm scared already. But go ahead.
So, it's funny to think that not every student that comes into your group is the same, right? And there's also students that that you have a different kind of rapport with them. And so Neil, which is funny, we're talking about my wife more than I thought, but she calls Neil. She calls Neil Bill 5 years ago because we are about that gap in age, but we're very similar. And so, Neil had a bunch of success at the very beginning working on electrochemical methane activation. We had a few papers come out. Actually, people still email me about that work all the time. There are people, by the way, the nickel zirconia thing is like very well cited. And
really?
People
Wow.
have used carbonate electrolytes and zirconia supports because of that paper,
Wow.
right?
That's surprising.
So it's
This
really
is-
fantastic, and people ask me about it all the time, but that's not the story.
So that could be the end of it. This is good. I like that. I like this part. Anyway.
So we get after this first year of success where we really learned a lot, and then we went into this inevitable period of despair for both of us because we couldn't figure out what the next thing to do was, and we couldn't quite characterize the products well. We couldn't find the catalyst that would make us get up in the morning and think that it was all worth it. So Neil comes to me and he says, I just don't want to do this anymore. Not grad school or anything, but this project. And so I remember saying, what are you doing tomorrow? It was a Friday. And Neil said, nothing. Why? And I said, well, be at my house at 8 o'clock tomorrow. Because he lived like a mile and a half away and, all that stuff. So Neil shows up at my house. Oh, and I told him, wear clothes that you don't care about. And I gave him, when he arrives at my house, an N95 mask. I was finishing my basement. I really mean me. I was building walls and everything. So I was in the middle of the mudding and taping of the drywall. And I was going to spend the whole day sanding walls. And so I hand Neil the mask, and we go downstairs. We listen to very similar music. So I turned on music, and I said, you have until we're done to talk to me about this. And it started off, he's just complaining at me, and I'm like, that's fine, but we need a solution. And finally, we get 2 hours in, and we're all covered in white dust and everything. Yeah. And he said, look, I've been reading these papers about batteries using nickel oxide, and they're really interesting and blah, blah, blah. And, they say the rest is history because actually that conversation has become not only a bunch of papers that not only Neil had, but then it became Alex Palmieri's PhD, then Ben Ing's PhD, and then, I have other students working on batteries now, all because Neil had a hissy fit and wanted to work on something else.
That's fair.
And I really mean it's all the battery work. It's very funny to think about how I got in with Duracell, for example, who we've been working with for almost a decade now. And it's because somebody at UConn in the dean's office Googled when Duracell contacted UConn and said, the School of Engineering, that we want to have a better relationship with them. She literally Googled alkaline battery UConn. And we weren't working on alkaline batteries, but we have been working on alkaline membrane fuel cells or anion exchange membrane fuel cells. And we were working on this lithium battery project with which then was funded by Ford and so on. And so my name pops up, and then I meet with Duracell, and then that becomes part of my sabbatical. That has also been 3 PhD students' PhD. And so, it's funny, this one interaction where Neil spoke up has become 7 people's PhD and millions of dollars that have come into our group that I didn't think to work on. And so, he deserves a lot of credit for that. So.
I also deserve my commission check. Is it coming or?
Well, I mean, the funny thing about that is when I get my commission check, I'll give you 10% finder's fee. It is funny though, I think that the whole funding mechanism for research, people don't really quite understand. Maybe we'll get into that, maybe we won't. But it has been a really nice thing for our group to work on that I never would have thought would have happened before Neil really came up with that idea. And even now, I'm at the University of South Carolina now. There's over a dozen people that are electrochemists, right? And there's about 15 people working on batteries. And since I took over this role as the associate dean, I've been sort of leading that group of folks working on batteries, trying to find, really where our place is, because, USC's been invested in batteries since the 1980s when they hired Ralph White, and have 15 faculty working on batteries and, 50 graduate students. How do you tell people that? Because most people don't even know that we have that much battery activity going on. And one of the things that we've sort of announced this past year, if I could plug it on the podcast, is that we are going to be building the Carolina Institute for Battery Innovation. And so that's going to be a new 85,000 square foot building on our campus. To prepare for that, we are actually in the process of planning a new pilot battery manufacturing facility that would be doors open in 2025.
That's awesome.
And the plan right now is that I'll be the first director of the institute, and I wouldn't even be a battery person if it wasn't for the story that we just talked about. Perhaps, right? And so that's a really cool thing that's growing at USC. It's been a really big part of my academic life. And so, like I said, it's because Neil threw a hissy fit, and here we are. But also, leading on to that, there are things that mean a lot to you in retrospect. So I remember, so there's this paper that Neil's the first author on, about finding the diffusion coefficient through these conversion materials.
I remember doing that on your kitchen table.
I was just going to say that. I remember, Neil, you were saying before about, my daughter and about maybe where the science background came from. Yeah. So Neil has all this data. He had basically taken a bunch of it's GITT data, essentially. Yeah. And we're at the table and we're trying to find what model is going to fit. So we have this little, we have paper, we're deriving equations and trying to figure out how we're going to make this model work. So we would derive equations. I hand Neil then the paper. Neil has his computer open, and we're trying to use Excel to do this regression, and it doesn't work, and we do it again and again. Well, my daughter's 2 years old. She's running around the dining room table that we're sitting at, and then I'm playing with her while Neil's programming. Neil's playing with her while I'm trying to figure out these equations and stuff. And it's a cool thing to think about, right? I mean, just how personal the whole thing becomes.
It's no wonder she's going to grad school next year.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think you're right there that she grew up really in this environment where I did stuff like that. I'm at the dining room table, whether it's with you or whether it's alone, like on my computer.
But to be serious for a second and slightly sentimental, that is something that I think is really pivotal about the way, our kids, we interact with our kids. Not that anybody would be per se, I suppose, but that we're you're not ashamed of the quote unquote nerdiness. You know what I mean? You're not like reticent to be doing complex things and speaking in a intelligible way around your young children. That is it left obviously an indelible mark on her, right? Mm-hmm. And that's critical now that she loves dinosaurs, and science more broadly. That's really that's a really cool thing to see develop as she gets older, right?
Yeah, and my son, I mean, he's younger than her. He's 11, he'll be 12 in a few weeks. I also see this in him. Being an 11-year-old boy, he kind of lacks the discipline that she has. They tell you this thing that, at least in my house, this is true, not to really speak in stereotypes, but my daughter is the quiet, thoughtful one, and my son, we lovingly call a hurricane. And, he reminds my mother of me a lot when I was his age. And so, I certainly am no longer a hurricane.
I think the last time I visited you at your house, I arrived, I walked to the base of the stairs. He was like 8 steps up. He sees me and without warning just jumps the remainder of the stairs. And thank God I was ready. I caught him. Like, that was a concussion and a hospital visit if I wasn't like, okay, we're doing this, you know?
Yeah, it would have been. It wouldn't have been the first one. I'll tell you. We've experienced broken toes and collarbone and all that stuff, you know. But but that kid loves life too, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a part of this that, the funny thing is, I feel like I work a lot and I do all the things that I do because it is the most interesting thing in my life and I love it.
Yeah.
And so
again, divorce papers.
Yeah, when I didn't say I love it the most. I just said I love it.
You said it's the most interesting thing. I'm just saying.
You know what? I've told my wife that too, so she knows what I mean.
Yeah.
But it requires that for me to want to do 60, 70-hour weeks and all the reading and all the team leading and building and all of that kind of stuff. You have to really care about it. You have to really like it.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I can't imagine if I had not gone to grad school and really hadn't had the encouragement to do all of these things that I've been doing. It's funny. You don't get to do this a lot where you just get to talk about, how you got here and, the personal side of it. I think that's lost on a lot of people. Your name is on papers and you go give a presentation at a conference. But I think that there's personal stories behind this that really matter a lot to me anyway. And there are people who have gotten me here that matter to me a lot. And you just don't get the opportunity to talk about that a lot. I mean, it's really funny. If I think about the people who really helped me to get here, I mean, mentoring has been a huge part of that. And, mentoring starts, you might not think about it this way, but like when you're a kid and your parents. So I say things like, my dad taught me how to be a good person. And then Jay, my PhD advisor, taught me how to be a good scientist. And Paul Cole, my postdoc advisor, taught me how to be a professor. And, I feel like those people have played such a huge role. And then you think even further back, I said, those are 3 men in my life. But when I was in high school, I was very satisfied just being the smart, lazy kid. And I really was. I mean, I was in high school. I mean, I could get an A in basically every class, and I didn't try. And, that happens. Yeah. And then there was a teacher in my high school. She was actually my English teacher, Miss Barrett. And you would never guess that she and I would get along so well. She was hippie. She lived in Jamaica when she wasn't in school. She wore flowy dresses, large woman, And she pulled me aside my junior year of high school. And she's like, when are you going to stop doing this? And I played dumb and, well, what do you mean? And she really said, when are you going to stop being lazy and actually apply yourself? And, you would think someone who went into chemical engineering, my chemistry teacher was the one who, showed me the light and everything. And no, it was an English teacher who just said, hey, knock it off. Yeah. And, also we talked before about whether I was going to go to grad school or not. And when I met my wife, I was planning to just get a job. And, she was the one that gave me this nudge of, hey, you have these other opportunities. You should take one of them. And she pushed me into going to grad school. And now when I graduated from IIT, I saw the job posting at Georgia Tech. And I didn't know if I would even apply for it because, like I said, I didn't have a lot of guidance. So no one had really told me that should be your target, is to go to a top university like that. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, would they even interview me? And she was the one that says, well, stop being dumb. I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen is you don't hear from them. And actually, I submitted my application on a Tuesday. And apparently, Paul called Jay and talked to him about me. And then Paul contacted me on Thursday. And then I had an interview on the following Tuesday and the job on Thursday.
Wow.
And so that, again, I don't know if I ever would have even ended up at Georgia Tech if, my wife hadn't given me a push. So some people teach you skills and some people give you a push. And it's real interesting to me that, I would imagine that a lot of people listening have the same experience where it's not always 100% in you to go do whatever you're going to do, but you rely on other people and their support. And that's why I try to do the same thing, right? Whether we're talking about undergrads before or the students that are in my group or even students that are in other groups.
Yeah.
I have people come to my office and I talk to them and try to give them the same kind of guidance that I got, because there's no way that I would be doing this without that.
So I just talked to her. She pulled the divorce papers back. That was really nice.
Awesome.
You can stay married. It's
This is
fine.
like the most wholesome
Yeah.
podcast episode, just like talking about people and like supporting each other. This is great. It's like no electrochemistry.
Yeah, let's make
in
it more
this.
negative. This is too positive for me. This is really,
Thank you, Bill. This has been fantastic. We have a game coming up, but first, a word from our sponsors. Hi, everyone. On the Electrochemistry Podcast, we talk about electrochemistry and fun topics, but thanks to sponsors like Pine Research Instrumentation, we have the opportunity to talk to you about a serious topic, electrochemical addiction, a serious epidemic sweeping the world. It takes real bravery for people like Bill Mustain to meet with us and open up about his problems.
I was addicted to it, and I've been addicted to it for 20 years. There, I wake up in a sweat in the middle of the night, thinking that, oh man, I have to do cyclic voltammetry.
More youth than ever are getting addicted to electrochemistry, and it's important as a parent for you to see the signs. Are your kids smart but don't know what to do? Are they considered cool only with a group of nerds, like Bill here?
I hate to say this, I was one of those smart kids who didn't really know what to do. I was very satisfied just being the smart, lazy kid. Only in a group of nerds have I ever been considered cool at all.
Is electrochemistry the only thing in their life?
It is the most interesting thing in my life, and I love it.
Electrochemical addiction might sound like fun,
And, we're all covered in white dust and everything.
but addiction only ends in despair.
We went into this inevitable period of despair for both of us, and suddenly 7 people were gone.
If you know someone who's addicted to electrochemistry, it's not too late. There is still time and there is still hope. Call the Electrochemistry Addiction Hotline if you know someone who's addicted to electrochemistry, and save a life today.
Advertisement is a joke for comedy purposes and is not real, nor does it constitute an offer of any kind from Pine Research. Restrictions apply. See terms and conditions for details. Not valid in Alaska, Hawaii, any of the contiguous 48 states, or any country on any of the 7 earthly continents, except Antarctica. Contact Pine Research for details, real offers, life advice, or product quotes.
All right, everybody, welcome to another game of EChem Abstract Madlibs. So if you never played Madlibs before, it's perhaps an outdated game at this point, but I'm old. So I played it when I was a kid, and here's how it works. There's a story, and there are words removed from the story. Often those are things like nouns and verbs and adjectives, okay? And so what you do is one person knows the story and knows the blanks. They ask someone else who doesn't know the story to give them random nouns, verbs, and adjectives. It fills in the story. But the goal is to have somebody who you're asking, they don't know what the story is at all, and so they just make up words, and you end up with this hopefully really ridiculous and nonsensical story at the end. So what we're going to play today is a variant of that I'm calling EChem Abstract Madlibs. And so I have a fake electrochemistry abstract, and I'm going to be asking my esteemed colleague Alex Peroff, as well as our guest and my former graduate advisor Bill Mustain here, for a series of things that will be a mix of nouns, verbs, adjectives, as well as science-y things like chemicals, numbers, units, etc., to fill out. And at the end, hopefully, we have a very ridiculous abstract. So, gentlemen, are you ready?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. So, as you are the guest, Bill, you will be providing most of the blanks for me, but this can be collaborative. So, Alex, please feel free to give answers as well. You can collaborate on answers however you wish.
You can tag me in if you
That's
need
correct.
me.
All right. The first thing I need is a food item.
Pizza.
Pizza. Very nice. All right. A material property.
Density.
Density. All right. I need an element.
Uranium.
Uranium. Very useful in electrochemistry world.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. An element or a compound. Any particular one.
Oxygen.
Oxygen. Oh, that's boring. Okay. So as what always
I
happens.
could give you a better one.
No, that's fine,
I just
it's
thought of
fine.
something
No,
that was both.
I'll tell you what. Our experience thus far doing these is that it always ends up being equal parts ridiculous, and then there's always one part in the abstract that like makes sense scientifically, accidentally, which is just hilarious.
Yes.
But it probably won't come from this one, which is where I need a sci-fi movie person.
Mueller from X-Files.
Oh gosh, that's an older one. Yeah. Wait. Mueller, is that the one?
Right, wasn't that David Duchovny's character?
Yeah. Is that right?
I never really watched
Scully
X-Files.
and
Scully and
that was what it was.
Was it Mulder?
Mulder. That's
Mulder.
Yeah, Mulder. I was like, I think that's almost right. Yeah, Mulder and Scully. Okay, Mulder. I'll put Fox Mulder so in case anybody doesn't know who that is, because I couldn't remember either. Okay, I need a Star Wars robot. There's pretty.
C-3PO.
Yeah, that's pretty easy.
I guess that's only like two
C3PO.
main. Oh no.
That was a bit of a
there's
leading
few,
question.
yeah.
I guess there's only like 2 answers, but okay. I need a number. And again, I preface this as I do every time. You're a scientist. That doesn't have to be 1, 2, or 3. Any number.
Oh, good. I thought of 47.82.
47.82. Okay, good. Another number.
131.65.
131.65. Okay. Another material property.
Mass.
Okay. An adjective.
Slow.
An animal.
Tiger.
You're very decisive. I like this.
This is good.
Yeah.
Most of the time it's like.
Yeah, most of the time there's a lot of deliberation and overthinking. A children's toy.
Fire truck.
That's a good one. Fire truck. Okay. I need a fraction.
1/8.
1/8. All right. I need 2 numbers. 2 different numbers.
81.1.
You can use scientific notation if you know. I'm just throwing it out there.
All right.
Just say.
3.06 times 10 to the minus 4.
6 times.
There we go.
Yeah, that works.
See,
He led the witness.
I am. I'm just sometimes you need to act like a scientist. Okay.
If you really want to mess Neil up, you should say something like 6,500,000,000.
Oh, come on. I didn't put 3 zeros yet.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, exactly. That one's tough right there. Okay, an adjective.
You can
Would
do
you like to give one?
Yeah, sure. How about silky?
Ooh, that's
Silky.
a good one.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a good one. All right, now Bill, you have to answer this one. I need a descriptor you would use for a professor.
Loud.
All right.
Especially this one talking.
Perfect. A property. I don't mean like a house. I mean like a.
Just another material property.
That's a good question. I wish I knew the answer. I just wrote property in my sheet here, and I don't know exactly what I was at. I know that it's not a physical property. I'm not 100% sure if it's a material property, but I don't know what other kind of property there is. So
Well, how about charge?
Charge.
It's electrochemical.
This
Make no
absolutely.
sense whatsoever because I don't remember the context of it. Because anyway, it's fine.
It'd be hilarious.
A scientific technique.
Voltammetry.
Voltammetry. See, this is where it's going to make sense because
Yeah,
you're giving me
it's gonna make
electrochemistry
sense.
answers.
Yeah,
That's
actually
fine.
give it
Another property.
Goodness, how many are there?
There's like 10 more.
10 more properties.
There's some. Okay, to be
Is
fair.
it 10 more times when you ask for a property?
No, there's no more properties. There's a bunch of elements and units.
Hardness.
Hardness. Yeah, I know it does take a little while, but sometimes it's like it's a number with units, and I want it to be silly.
Did you guys not have a TV when you were a kid or something? Or like, we need to make this game take as long as possible.
I have a very, very depressive kind of a childhood. No. All right, I need a geological feature.
Cliff.
Ooh, okay, cliff. Scientific prefix.
So like
Micro?
milli.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Micro,
Like
okay.
milli, micro, whatever. I need a carnival food item.
Oh, what's the sugar stuff on the stick or whatever that you would
Like,
eat?
what's that? Funnel
rock
cakes?
No, not a funnel cake. I'm thinking
Oh,
about
cotton candy.
Cotton candy.
Candy,
Thank
candy.
you.
Yeah. Okay, cotton candy. It has to be plural, so I'm just gonna put candies because that's how you pluralize. Cotton candy. More cotton candies. I don't know. Anyway, I need 2 different elements.
I'll give you more normal ones this time, like
Okay.
iron
Okay.
and silicon.
Silicon. All right, 2 different numbers. We're almost done, I promise.
4.06
Yeah.
and 1.1 times 10 to the minus 7.
10.
That's
to
good.
the minus- yeah, these are good. There's no negative numbers
Or imaginary numbers.
or imaginary numbers.
Or
We've had like natural log of I before and
Yeah.
all kinds of fun stuff. So, all right, 1 scientific prefix.
Milli.
Milli. All right, and then I need 3 different units.
Centimeter squared.
Two more. It's like you're adding actually prefixes and like other things. I'm just gonna go with it. It's fine.
Newtons.
Newtons. And one more.
And gallons.
Gallons. Oh, that's good.
Let's
We're
go.
mixing in like imperial units or whatever. This is good. All right, perfect. So,
It's like every first draft of a paper I receive.
Yeah.
yeah. All right, this we're gonna read from this thing. So I lied to you. This is not a fake abstract. This is from a little-known paper called "Explaining the Role and Mechanism of Carbon Matrices in Enhancing Reaction Reversibility of Metal Oxide Anodes for High-Performance Lithium-Ion Batteries."
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's a paper by Alessandro Palmieri, Neil Spinner, Schweizau, and William Mustain. So I have butchered one of our publications.
Mine as well.
Yeah. So here we go. This is our publication, EChem Abstract Madlib. Using pizza as a representative oxide, it is shown that the interparticle electronic density in uranium battery anodes can be drastically enhanced by additive oxygen. I mean, that's
Actually,
Like,
it's not.
could be.
That could
That
be.
sentence started with pizza.
Yeah, it did start with pizza. That's true. 2 types of carbon, Fox Mulder C3PO and reduced graphene oxide, or RGO, were added in various amounts ranging from 47.82 to 131.65 weight percent. See, that was back to my problem about, over carbon, conductivity problems.
Yeah.
The mass boost is highly dependent on the carbon type, where RGO requires much less addition to realize the same effect due to its higher slow tiger concentration and fire truck utilization efficiency. 1/8 cell charge-discharge experiments were performed at various rates between C over 81.1 and 3.06 times 10 to the minus 4 C.
Wow.
Those are different. From which direct
Imagine how long one cycle takes.
Yeah.
a long time.
Yeah.
Well, a year anyway. From which direct quantitative links are made between the silky layer electronic conductivity and, first, reaction reversibility, or the achievable loudness, and the second thing, conversion kinetics. See, this is where it makes sense. Charge and rate capability. See, there's always one part. There's always one part where you
Always
make it,
partially.
it happens. Through TAFL analysis and voltammetry spectroscopy. That's a burgeoning field.
All right, after this, we got to talk about who calls EIS voltammetry spectroscopy.
Voltammetry
spectroscopy.
Oh man, that's great.
Over the dark arts. Keep going.
That's right. It is shown that enhanced hardness, that makes sense kind of, does not affect the underlying reaction mechanism, but allows for more complete utilization of the active cliff. Did not know that. These findings provide new insight into the design of high-performing metal oxide advanced carbon microcomposite lithium-ion battery cotton candies. That's a mouthful. Yes. And allowed us to achieve long-term stable capacity retention for iron silicon with 4.06% RGO, or 1.1 times 10 to the minus 7 millicentimeters squared newtons per gallon. After 250 charge-discharge cycles at 1C and stable performance at high rates.
Nice.
Yes. Nice. So that is, without question, our best publication.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Sure.
Just sure.
I'm honored to have been a part of that. The most important thing is that we use pizza. Really.
Yeah,
exactly.
pizza.
I'm from Chicago.
Yeah, exactly. You know pizza, so that's why it was.
Admittedly a casserole, but it's still delicious.
Yeah. Deep dish.
I like thin crust personally, so don't hate me. It's fine.
They are two different foods. I also like thin crust pizza.
Yeah.
They're just different.
Yeah,
I agree with that. I remember Jon Stewart back in the day had this whole Chicago style versus New York style pizza, and it was one of the funniest skits I've seen. So
they're
hilarious.
just different things.
They're just different things.
Look, we can start the podcast over, and we could do the next episode
just pizza.
starting with pizza this time.
It's
fine.
I have a dissident opinion. They're both pizza. Come at me, bro.
Yeah.
Well, in any case, this has been a total dumpster fire, and that's the point. So thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of the Electrochemistry Podcast, and we'll see you next time.